no matter, tomatoes come, you have all the waste there, you know, the vegetables that they didn't sell from yesterday and they can't sell today, and all of those. So we need to begin to look at where these wastes are, right? Where these wastes are, and let's begin to look at how we can source it. And that's because no matter how they sell waste to you, right? It's still going to be way more cheaper than if you have to go and buy some finished feed to raise your larvae. It takes a lot. There's a bit more strategizing. There's a bit more planning ahead that needs to be done. But if all of those are in place, you find out that your system can run functionally. I'll give an example. A few weeks ago, I was in Trinidad and I got to a brewery. They make alcoholic drinks, right? And the unique thing, because most of the breweries that I'm aware of use grains. They use grains to so sorghum and all of that to produce their drinks. But this particular brewery they use molasses. Molasses is the byproduct from sugar production, right? And so that means that they need to liaise with sugar factories all across the world to continue to receive molasses from all these companies. And this company has been in production for 200 years. So that tells you that even if you are you're running a system based on somebody's waste, you can still survive, right? A bit of strategizing can be done. So there were these huge tanks that we were shown, and every time they get a shipment of molasses from one factory or the other, they just dump into those tanks. And that's what they use. So they don't use any grains, they just use molasses, which means that their system is working, is based on somebody else's waste. And if they've been able to survive over 200 years in that system, then that means that it's a business that is built on someone else's waste can thrive. Okay, so that said, today we're going to be looking at, in two parts, we'll look at larva processing. So how you've raised larva to a large extent. I mean, everybody in this room should be able to get your larva from eggs, get your fly and then collect eggs and produce up until you harvest your larva. Also, so we'll look at the choices for larva processing, and then in the second part we'll be looking at how much of this can we use in our animal diets. And this will give you an insight into how much of the market is available for black soldier fly, and then it will also, for those who are producers, for those of you who have farms or you plan to make feeds, because we also look at different options available to you as a black soldier fly larva entrepreneur. Will look at different options by which you can put your food on the market. So I'm at the Department of Animal Science UI, and essentially what I do there, most of the research I carry out, is looking at unconventional energy protein ingredients for poultry feeding. And that's because today, primarily we feed our birds on soybean and corn. So over 80% of any feed that comes out of your feed mill is soybean and corn. So anything happens to soybean production anywhere in the world, it's going to hit you. I hope we know that majority of our soybean and maize is imported. So it's not flooding in Nigeria. The day it floods in Argentina, it will hit your farm in Nigeria because you are depending on those, yes. And so the more we can find alternatives, locally produced, it doesn't have to be huge. huge, right? We're not saying equal soybean. Soybean production, those who have been driving soybean production have been at it for so many years, right? You're not going to overthrow soybean in 10 years. But even if we are able to replace soybean at 5%, it is huge, right? That means that the day that soybean prices are looking funny, you can turn and say, can add this to my diet. But the challenge we have as big farmers is, if you're going to come to me to begin to patronize you or begin to use black soldier fly, I need to be sure that I can depend on your supply. That I must be able to, because we don't like to change our feeds anyhow. I mean, people pay big time to get their feed formulated, right? To get their formulations written out. And so, if I prepare a formulation based on maize and soybean, and now I've been using it for years, and now you're saying I should begin to incorporate black soldier fly even at 10%, you must be able to give me an assurance that every time I need to make 20 tons of feed, I will have black soldier fly available, like black soldier fly larvae available. Because one thing farmers don't want to do is continue to switch. Once you change your feed, when you make a change in your ingredient, it affects your birds the next day, right? No matter how subtle that changes, it affects your birds the next day. So it's asking farmers to swap some of their soybean for black soldier fly is asking them to make a big sacrifice. So on your part, we should be ready to make sure that the availability of black soldier fly is there. So today we'll just quickly look at larva processing. We primarily will look at black soldier fly larva, comparing it with the conventional protein ingredients that we use in poultry. Okay, I have a bias for poultry, so many of my examples will be around poultry. But also, poultry still uses a large chunk of our finished feed, because unlike swine we can kind of mix, we can give them substrates, but they can also survive on some other form of nutrient. But when you're raising broilers on the intensive, or you're raising layers on the intensive, you need to use finished feed 100%. And so most of the feeds that come out of our feed mills today actually go into poultry production. We'll also talk about black soldier fly harvesting, how you harvest and process it, and how the different methods of harvesting and processing can impact on the quality of the ingredients that you produce, the black soldier fly larva that you produce at the end of the day. And the quality of black soldier fly that comes out will also affect the kind of feeds that I make. So it's important that you know what your nutritionist desires from the black soldier fly, so that you take a decision. For example, at what age do you harvest? At what age or at what time do you harvest larva? You have a wide window in the larva phase, right? So you as a farmer, you as the entrepreneur will decide at what age you want to harvest, and that will depend on you most probably will have collected maybe over an 5-day period. You collect some larvae of different ages and process it. You send your samples to the lab, look at the quality of the larvae that you produced at different ages, and look for the one that has the best quality, that matches what your farmer needs, right? So based on that, you now decide, okay, I'm going to harvest on so day, because the quality of larva I get at that time, right, matches some other ingredients. And then we'll close on how the choice of a processing method will influence the quality of black soldier fly. So starting off, we have information on the nutrient composition of your black soldier fly. So the insect meal here is a black soldier fly, and we're comparing it. For us, soybean is primary, right? It's the main protein ingredient we use in our feeding of poultry. For those in fish production, a lot of fish meal goes into their production. So based on this, you find out in terms of crude protein, the protein in soybean meal is similar in terms of levels to insect meal. Now, while you have a wider range for black soldier fly, let's note that one uniqueness with black soldier fly is that outer skeleton. You know, your larva has an exoskeleton, right, which is made of chitin, right? And chitin is a protein. So whenever you analyze for protein, right, you are analyzing for the protein in the larva as well as the protein in the chitin. Now, we know that the chitin is not digestible, right? So that means that some of this protein that we assume is there, your animal cannot use it, right? So in as much as it looks much higher than soybean, the presence of chitin is also a concern. And so when you want to harvest, or when you want to decide on what day to harvest, one of the things you want to consider is what's the chitin level of the larva that you harvest at different days. What your choice will most probably be that day that chitin level is lowest, as well as protein level is high. So you want to have a good balance of chitin level and protein level in the larva. So when you find out that, then you can now take a decision. Oh, I want to harvest on day 19, or you want to wait a bit more or harvest earlier, right? So those are because for us, we primarily are using black soldier fly as your protein source. But we also know that chitin is not digestible, so you want to ensure that you have minimal levels or content of chitin in your black soldier fly larva. Another thing we focus on is the amino acids. Essentially, protein is made up of different amino acids. So the amino acids in protein is actually what our animals are using. So our focus is on the amino acids. And so I'm going to be digressing a bit, having to take you through a bit of small biochemistry to make our understanding clear. So in poultry, we have some of the amino acids that make up proteins that we call indispensable amino acid, or in other places you may hear it called essential amino acids, right? Now, we call them essential because as human beings and as animals, we are able to produce some amino acids from the food we eat. But there are some amino acids we are not able to produce. And so these essential amino acids are those amino acids that our body cannot produce, right? But we need them. So we must be able to deliver it in food, right? So as a farmer or as a poultry farmer, you want to ensure that these indispensable amino acids are met in your diet. They are available in your diet because your animals cannot produce them. Now, the other group, which we call the dispensable or non-essential, because we have 20 amino acids. But these are the first 5 and the most important amino acids we consider when we are making poultry food. The other ones we don't bother because we know that if these amino acids are present, your body will use these amino acids to produce the other ones that it needs, right? So you want to ensure that these amino acids are present in the diet. So we have listed them in the left by importance. So for poultry, for poultry birds, methionine is considered the most important, right? And we call it the limiting amino acid. So I think I have to skip the slide. So for us, methionine in poultry, methionine is the first limiting amino acid. Lysine is the second, threonine is the third. Now, I'll have to skip the slides a bit to, I removed it from here. Let me go and look for where I put it. Good. So, what's the concept of limiting amino acid? Not only are you meeting the need of the animal, right? But when we say something is a limiting amino acid, let's look at these two drums, right? Each of these drums are made of panels, right?
Okay.
Okay. So these drums are made of panels, and we have named these panels according to different amino acids, right? How much water can this drum hold? How much water?
As much as the lowest edge.
Thank you very much. And that's what a limiting amino acid is. A limiting amino acid is that amino acid that is so important that not only is its presence in the diet a challenge, but it will also, even when other amino acids are present, it will not allow us utilize or allow our animals utilize those amino acids.
Wow.
So not only is methionine level a concern with all the processes that needs methionine, but it will also affect others.
So the effective.
And so because of that, you would bear me witness, when you make feeds, we often will add methionine and lysine as extracts, because they must not be insufficient. If they are insufficient, they are going to affect the sufficiency of the other ones, even if they are available, right? And so, in this second example, we see methionine and lysine levels increase, and then we see better utilization of these other ones. These ones didn't change, right? But now we can utilize them better because the limiting amino acids are at the level that they should be, right? So these amino acids are concerns for us. When we get to processing, right, we will revisit this and how this affects our choice of processing method. Okay, so let me go back. Okay, so based on limiting amino acids, we have number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And you will see that for black soldier fly, it's comparable to soybean, right? To a large extent, especially for the first two, and that's why we propose black soldier fly as a good replacement for soybeans. Okay. Now for fish meal has much higher crude protein as well as those amino acids, but the black soldier fly and soybean seem to be very similar. However, there are certain challenges that we as feed producers have with using black soldier fly, and that is going to affect how you're going to produce black soldier fly for me, right? Black soldier fly has a high fat content, right? High fat content affects shelf life. Okay. So you don't, if you're, so in Yoruba we say when you fry meat they say dimbe, right? Essentially you are reducing the moisture content and the fat content. If your meat sits in oil and then it swells in the oil, that meat is not going to last, right? The same challenge we have with our feeds. When the fat content in a feed is too high, it affects how well we can store our feed. And remember, if your feed mill has bad feeds, right? Yes. Look at the volume of feed that is produced. I don't want to produce 10,000 bags, 50,000 bags, and then they return 40,000 that it is spoiled, right? So there's a level of fat that I can permit in my diet. And because your black soldier fly is bringing fat, right? For me, it is a concern. So you must be able to give me black soldier fly with levels that will not impact the quality of the feed, right? So that's one, your shelf life is, and then apart from spoilage, there is this rancid, we call it rancid smell, right? You get an off smell when oil begins to go bad, right? You get an off smell. The off smell affects the way my animals will eat this food. So once a feed begins to smell rancid, my animals will not eat it. And that for me is a problem, right? And so if I begin to incorporate black soldier fly in my diets, in my animal feed, this will become a concern for me. I already talked about the chitin content, right?
Yes, sir.
Chitin is made up of protein, but we know it is that portion of protein that is not digestible. If it's too high, it's going to be a problem for me, because when I formulate my feed, I am assuming that my animal will be able to utilize that protein. So if my feed now has much higher chitin, what will happen is that some of the protein that I expect my animal to use to grow and build muscle is actually not available because it's present as chitin. So that's number 2 concern. I also talk about volume, right? There's a large need for it, and then you also must be able to tell me that, prove to me that you are dependable, right? So supply volume and consistency of that, of my supply, that I'm always going to get it when I need it, is a concern. Then also we have consumer acceptance. Some people were already talking about not tasting the larva this morning. You're going to get a lot of that on the field. Yeah. For no reason, the person will just tell you that no, they cannot use it. No, it's maggots. So, despite the fact that all the crayfish you buy in the market, right? What waste goes into the water? All the fecal waste. In fact, if you are conversant with the riverine area, riverine areas don't have toilets inside their houses. They just straight into the river. Riverine areas, most times you get to riverine areas, you're not likely to find houses that have toilets. Even the ones that have toilets don't have septic tanks. They don't channel to the river or to the sea. So
that's what fish eat.
And that's what the fish eat. And nobody has complained about the fish that they give you. But then, once you raise this, then you're going to begin to have problems. Then smell campaigns. You're not when you begin to gain ground. That's when you know that you have enemies. Nobody's making noise now because you are not there. When you start to get there, the soybean producer will become your enemy. They will do campaign. They will tell you. In fact, they were exposed to all the people eating egg. Why they should not eat eggs from farmers that use black soldier fly, right? So those are challenges that we will face using it, as well as you. Once people start to be what did you put inside? Even me too, I will not call you next time to supply to me because it's going to begin to be a problem for you. So these are things that, apart from knowing how to raise, right? We also need to begin to look at how do we solve this in the product that we want to push out there, right? So this will determine the kind of decisions that we make along the line. Another thing to consider, why is this not moving? Okay. So another thing to consider is how do you want to reach the farmer with your insect protein? Do you want to sell live larvae? I assume that all of us are producing larvae at this point because we're looking at larva processing, right? Right. So all of us have larvae. How do you intend to sell your larvae? Are you going to sell it to me as live larvae? So you harvest and you give it to me.
Fresh.
Fresh. Now, what's going to happen? What are the challenges with fresh? Right? You most probably will be working with people who want to process it. So they collect from you. So I just have I saw this video yesterday. They talked about free veg dryers that they use for drying this Larvae. So I decide to buy a dryer. I don't have enough cage. I just wait for you to produce it. Harvest it, I take. Right? So, do you have a processor who is going to take it from you? If you're going to go with fresh larvae, you want to be sure that you have a processor who is going to take it from you, or fish farmers are willing to take the fresh larvae. They don't process, right? They pour it into the ponds. So those are the kind of people you are likely to work with. The fish farmer who wants to throw it into the pond, no stress, just harvest and pour it there, or a processor who wants to dry, or who wants to do whatever processing, and we'll talk about different processing. You may want to go further to process your larvae, right? Now, processing could be in different forms. You may just want to dry it, right? You may also want to defat it. You know, we talked about high fat being a challenge. So if you go an extra step to defat it, your black soldier fly larvae will most probably be able to last longer on the shelf than the dehydrated one. So the dehydrated one is where you remove just the water, right? You dry it. But for your the oiled or defatted, you have removed the fat. So the oiled or defatted will last longer on the shelf than the dehydrated, right? Okay. And so in that case, you most probably will be working with factories that produce feed, or farmers who make their feed. So they take it from you and then they use it to make those feeds. I'm more likely to take dehydrated, defatted larvae. I'm less likely to buy live larvae because I don't feed live larvae to poultry, right? So we're more likely to do that. Then you also have insect protein concentrates. For those of us who have are conversant with the feed industry in Nigeria, I think it's animal care. Animal care has something they call a protein concentrate, right? And they just tell you, buy this, add this portion of maize, this portion of wheat offer. Do you know what's inside that bag? No. Nobody knows. And he's not compelled to tell you anyway. Now, if you create an insect protein concentrate, you're not, no authority in terms of whether it's our standard organization or will require you to provide the ingredient list, right? With our feeds, they don't ask us to produce ingredient list. They just tell us the nutrient composition. Yeah. How much protein is there? How much fat is there? How much of that is there? So this will save you smear campaign because you will have a protein concentrate. You are the one who knows that is insect that is inside. But you tell people how to mix it, they mix it, their birds are doing well, they keep coming back. Right? Though you don't get any yolk and all of those ones, it's not a problem. You produce your insect concentrates, sell, bag and sell a concentrate. Or you want to go all out and produce a finished feed. So you prepare a feed, but you know that the protein portion of your feed is coming from your black soldier fly. Again, you're not required to disclose. Just make sure it meets the animal's nutrient requirements, and we're good with that. So these are different ways you can enter the feed industry in Nigeria for now. Either you're providing live or fresh larvae to farmers, or you're doing one level of processing or the other, you can go further to add value. So you either present it as a protein concentrate or present it as a finished food. So those are opportunities that you have. And so if you also cover, so say for example you receive live larvae, you may just process it, produce a concentrate, and then push that out. So those are different levels of possibilities in the value chain in terms of animal feeding that your black soldier fly can tap into. So in this past session, I had a student who worked on creating an insect protein concentrate. So it was largely the black soldier fly, some soybean, and then all the nutrients, the minerals the minerals, the vitamins, and all of those salts, and then she made that up, and then you just add 60 kg of maize to that meal and feed, right? So that's just one example. If you want to go out
That's a good one.
and produce that.
What's the level of, as any industry, any company manufacturing company to pick up, because I'm thinking it's a very good one to start with.
It's something, it's doable. It's doable. For all we know, we don't know what is in the MCA, in animal care zone. I mean,
They're concentrates.
they are concentrates. They're not required to tell you. So for all you know, it could be
And it's
BSF.
working.
It's working, and people are buying it. Yes, it's working, so farmers are buying it. So those are ways that you can tap into that. So let's quickly look at. So when you are considering your choice of processing, right? Of course, cost of production and the scale of your enterprise should be your primary concern. I don't have plenty money. Processing is not what you want to go into. Even if you're going to go into processing, you may need to begin to look for small level equipment, right? Inexpensive, that you will outgrow. You will outgrow them rapidly, but you need to get that first if you're going to process on a small scale, right? Then the aesthetic quality. How does it look? I got some black soldier fly from IITA, the last year when we were there, and I don't know how it was dried, but I know it was not. It's not a local oven, because the black soldier fly came out a pale color, right? Didn't look burnt, right? So it looked good. Once it starts looking black, right? It's a concern, right? So, and then it was intact, right? It was intact, so you would see that this was larvae, right? When you start to grind, right, as you see other methods as you go along, when you start to grind, then we begin to have concerns of adulteration, right? If you grind an ingredient, it's easy to adulterate that ingredient. So a company tells you this is their product. So when you buy from the feed mill, you are telling them no. Somebody along the way has said to add stuff. We had that problem with DCP some time ago. We get DCP from the feed mill, and in 10 days, our animals are crippled, paralyzed. They can't move. Later, someone told us they have added flour to it, and you can't tell because DCP is like white cement. So if you add flour to it, nobody is going to know until it begins to manifest on your farm. So because of that, we kind of found ways to get into the company, but the company says the minimum we can sell to you is a bag. So every year we go and get a couple of bags, and then we keep it in the office, although we are not using it. But we would rather buy a bag and begin to use 1 kilo, 2 kilos for each study, rather than go to a feed mill to get 1 kilo and eventually got 3/4 kg flour. And then your animals begin to suffer for it. So aesthetic quality, and then nutritional quality. what is it supplying to, how is it supplied to the animal. As we go further, you find out that your processing method affects the quality of the final product. So we also want to make a choice of a processing method. So first, we need to consider is how do you harvest and slaughter. So you've talked about different types, ways of you harvest. You tip them over, you add water to one pot, ask them to migrate. So we're not going there. But when you want to slaughter, one of the concerns is, unlike your chicken, where you have a large animal you can degut, degutting larvae is very difficult. I won't say impossible, but it's very difficult.
You just allow them to vomit whenever they are eating on the substrate. So maybe starting them for like.
So that's where the feed. That's where the feed withdrawal period comes in. So instead of degutting, you could use a feed withdrawal period. So maybe for 24 to 48 hours prior to harvest, you withdraw the substrates, right? So they don't eat for that for 24 to 48 hours. So to a large extent, the tract, the GIT is empty, right? Let's also note that whatever is left in the digestive tract of your animal or of your black soldier fly larvae will affect the quality of at the end of processing, right? So in terms of spoilage, so those are so that's why considering the withdrawal period is important. So withdraw for a period of time. Then after the feed withdrawal period, how do you want to kill them? The different ways of doing it: heating. Here you put in warm water, the hot water. The blanching. You dry direct. Okay. Some people do the blanching, where you put in hot water, right? It gives you a cleaner product, right? But it also gives you a product with less fat, because a lot of the fat goes into liquid in the hot water. So when you withdraw the larvae from the water, some of the oil is gone. So you can, if you do blanching, you're likely to get a product with less fat than. So if you are interested in reducing the fats, right, for whatever is your final product, blanching may be a good idea, because you get a cleaner product because you have kind of washed it, right? And then you also lose some fat in the process. Then you have the microwave or oven drying. You also have freezing, right, where you put the animals in the freezer for a period of time. Now, freezing, the kind of animals that, the way insects were created, right, they seem to be able to withstand very low temperatures for a long time. So you would not be surprised that you take your larvae out of the freezer after 2 days, and it returns to room temperature and they start to move around. Yes. It shocked me too. Then I went back to the biology and I understood why. So yes, freezing, but what freezing does is that it slows down their metabolism, right? So after, it kind of like slows them down, and then you can take the next step in your processing. So if you freeze and then freeze dry, you don't have the animals, the larvae moving around. And then you also have CO2 or nitrogen association. So you create a chamber, you put your larvae inside, you pump or channel carbon dioxide or nitrogen, so it kind of suffocates them. And then you also have the mechanical disruption, so maybe some kind of grinding. So I watched a video yesterday what they harvested, added, I think it was EY, they harvested and then added wheat bran, no, it wasn't wheat bran, rice husk. They added rice husk, so they mixed rice husk with the larvae and put it into a pelleting machine. And so they now had pellets, which they sun-dried for 2 days. So at the end of the day, your larvae is in pellets, right? But the rice husk was used there to absorb moisture. Because if you just put it into the pellet, it's going to be a mess, right? But you need some kind of material to absorb the moisture, right? Okay. So, and that was what they used the rice husk for. So anyone considering that could replace that with wheat or farm. But let's note that when you do that, your pellet is going to have much higher fiber, right? So when you're asking people to mix it with, you must consider that wheat or farm that you had added to it. If not, you're going to produce a diet that has much higher fiber than you should have. So those are different ways that it could be slaughtered. So let's look at the qualities of these different, the products that you get from these different methods. So with the fresh black soda fly larvae, of course it doesn't require any sort of processing. You just take it out, right? And so we find out that the protein content is about 6 to 10% of the life of fresh larvae. The fat is also 6 to 10%, and the water activity is 0.9. When we talk about water activity is our measure of how much moisture, right, is in a product and how likely it's going to last, right? So when water activity ranges from 0 to 1, right? So if your water activity is close to 1, it says that the moisture level is very high and shelf life is very low. So you really can't, I'm not sure you can keep your larvae beyond 48 hours before it begins to go bad. So your fresh larvae is, so it has an expected shelf life of 1 to 2 days. So now, if you are going into business and you want to begin to sell them fresh, something you must consider is that your larvae is still growing, right? So you do not want them to enter the pupa stage, right? Because when they do that, chitin level is going up. Remember, as we go from the larvae, right? It begins to become darker, right? As they grow older, chitin levels are increasing, right? So you must have a ready market to do this. You either have a ready market or you have a processing you want to push it into. So you want to create pellets, you want to dry them, then that's what you should do immediately. They don't keep, your fresh larvae does not keep well. So a farmer is not going to buy 10 bags from you to feed for 1 week. It's not, they can't be stored. Now when we talk about drying, even when you dry, your drying is going to produce, the kind of drying method that you use will produce products with different aesthetic value. So let's look, for example, the first one you have the microwave dried, the second one was roasted, the third one was oven dried. You could also do freeze drying. Freeze drying, what is freeze drying? A freeze dryer dries at, or it removes water at very low temperatures, right? So when we are oven drying, you are increasing the temperature, right? If you are freeze drying, a freeze dryer will remove at very low temperatures. So you would normally freeze whatever you want to dry, and then you put it into, you freeze that, you put it in a freezer, right? Once it's frozen, you put it in a freeze dryer, right? So when you put it in a freeze dryer, the atmosphere in a freeze dryer has, the pressure is much lower, and so you now have much lower temperatures. You go as low as -60 minus 100 degrees. Remember when we talked about water evaporation? When you boil water, right? It will evaporate, right? When you lower the temperature, it will freeze, right? But remember we said at a point, water can go from frozen to gas. It can go from solid to gas. And we said it's what all the data tell us was. So you put a frozen sample, pressure is lowered, temperature is ultra low, and so it goes from frozen water to gaseous water, and then it escapes. And at the end of the day, when you now open it up, the sample is dry, right? Now, freeze drying will normally preserve nutrients best, right? Freeze drying will preserve nutrients best, but it also is a more expensive or the most expensive form of drying compared to the other ones that we have here, because it has a high dependence on electricity and specialized equipment to get that done. But even for the other ones, we see that your microwave does a rapid removal of water, or rapid dehydration, while your oven drying does a much slower dehydration. And it affects the look of the final product that comes in. So the rapid dehydration gives you a lighter colored product. For those that you do a slower dehydration, like your oven drying, it gives you a darker finished product. And we'll talk about the chemistry behind that color change in a bit. So,
is there any effect on the quality of the product, on the output?
On the output, okay. So, how does this affect the fat content, right? So, in this study, we observed that your oven-dried black soda fly larvae, which is the slow drying, right, or slow dehydration, had much higher fats, right? So oven drying leaves more fats in your product compared to microwave drying, or even in your fresh product. And if you microwave, if you just go and put some larvae in the microwave, what happens is it bursts, right? It will expand and burst, right? So you lose oil. Oil leaves the product, right? So you have a much significantly lower oil or fat in your microwave dried and fresh compared to your oven dried. However, in terms of the protein content, in this particular study, they did see a difference in the protein content based on whatever method that was used. Okay. And then we talk about the oiling, right, or the fatting. So in some, you may go further to the oil or the fat. So essentially, separate the oil from the larvae. And so when you separate the oil, you have what we refer to as the black soldier fly meal. So you have the larvae meal, and then you have the oil separate. And this can be done either by mechanical extraction. Maybe you have a press. You know the way we do fufu? Yes. You put it in a bag, you put weight on it, and you push it down, the oil comes out of it, right? We refer to that as mechanical extraction. So the oil can be done that way. I think some PKC is also done that way. They add pressure, push the oil out of it. But you also have solvent extraction, and they do that for soybean. They do that also for a lot of GNC too, where they would add a solvent, maybe hexane. If you add hexane, oil will dissolve in hexane, right? Or in petroleum ether, or any alcohol-based solvent. The oil will dissolve into it, right? And so you just pour your solvent through the sample and it washes the oil out. At the end of the day, you have a product that that is devoid of oil. And then the oil goes out with the solvent. You can now separate. In fact, once you keep the solvent, the alcohol will separate from the oil, and you can then just decant. Okay, so that's another way. But again, the BSF, the product you get here is already milled, right? It's not intact. It's already milled. And so your fat, the oil portion is just primarily oil, and then the meal has a portion of protein, and that would range from 21% to 65%. Okay, and this difference could be due to the kind of extraction that was done, right? So you expect that the protein left in your solvent extraction leaves more protein in your product than your mechanical extraction. And that, of course, that also affects the shelf life. So the shelf life of your black soda fly larva meal, you can expect it to last as much as 6 months. Also, the extent of defatting is also, you could have a highly defatted product. So, say you are doing okay, let's note that when you do your mechanical extraction, right, the product you get always has more oil than your solvent extraction. So your solvent does a more thorough extraction than your mechanical extraction. So let's just quickly look at this. This is, in this study, they looked at partially defatted and highly defatted, right? So this, I think this was solvent extracted, but the extent of washing with solvent differed. And you see that if you look at the eta extract value, the eta extract value is the measure of fats in the product. So you see that you have about 18% here, and then with the highly defatted, you have about 4.6%. Now, you ask whether you're highly defatting or you are partially defatting would also depend on the industry or the people you want to supply that to. For example, when I make feed, I still need to add oil to my feed, right? And so, I'm less likely to go for a highly defatted black soda fly larva. Because if I go for highly defatted, I will still use my hand and go and buy soya oil to add to it. In fact, the study we did last year, we didn't defat at all, right? So we used the full fat, because most of what we have published, of course, outside of Nigeria, so most of what we have published are products that come from factories. Now, your factories are not going to do full fat black soda fly because the shelf life is poor. But if I am producing for UI farms, right, I'm better off just delivering to them full fat black soda fly larva, right? Because it will also meet the oil needs of the animal. But if you're creating a product that you want to last long, it's going to say, for example, these ones will most probably be shipped from country to country, right? Which means they're going to spend a lot of time on the way and on the shelf, and then when I buy it, me too, I may even keep it for another 6 months. So you want something that is highly defatted to reduce or slow down spoilage. So again, who your target market will determine the kind or the extent of processing and how far you want to go in processing the products. Also, what does the farmer want? It's important. We've had cases where people don't want to collect the the solvent extracted soya bean. Because the solvent extracted soya bean is almost like there's no oil in it at all, right? And so the people who just add it to maybe those who add it to foods for like pigs, they are concerned like it's too dry, right? So again, what's the concern? What's the pain point of your target market? Would they rather have it highly defatted or not defatted? So I just want to give an example. There's this lady who sells, she sells dried meats. She sells dried meat in the market. And so she has ready to eat, it's roasted, it's ready, she has ready to eat. She has export standard. The export standard, if you buy it, you must not soak it in water. So dehydrate it. But if you want to get, because people have this notion, I heard somebody say, the meat in the UK is different from the meat in Nigeria. I don't know. And that's the basis for which somebody will sit in the UK and order meats from Nigeria. So she says she does not order, she doesn't send ready to eat outside the country because there's no assurance that it's going to be okay, it's going to be or it's even going to make it won't spoil before it gets there. Yeah. But for export standard, she's sure. But you don't sit down and chew export standard. You must first put it in water to dehydrate.
It's not ready to eat.
It's not ready to eat. So it just goes to show that your target market, right, and the conditions around which you.
Is there no way to store the food fatted feed? I mean, in storing to make it last, the shelf life.
Okay, we can do that. We can freeze. Is that money you want to spend?
Extra.
It's, I mean, you're just adding to, and then how many of your farmers have that facility? Right? How many of your farmers can afford to freeze their feed? But a farmer wants 100 bags. He wants to buy 100 bags, 500 bags at a time, right? But does not have the facility to freeze. Right, so if you're going to be producing for that kind of market, you will want to do at least a partial defatting so that the feed can last longer.
And that means the fish feed are partial defatting.
Yes, your fish meal is
without oil.
Your fish meal has oil content, but some defatting has to be done. Then again, the kind of fish. You're less likely to make fish meal with mackerel. They will most likely make it with fish like herring.
Yes.
Those have they have less fat. So you will. That's why if you look at your local fish meal, you will see scales.
Yeah.
You're not going to use the fat fish, the fish that is high in fat, do not have scales. So those are not the kind of fish that is used for fish meal, except you're going to go an extra length to defat them. So you want to use fishes with lower fat. So again, the extent of you may decide to defat, but decide I don't want to defat extensively, right? Depending on the need. Again, if you are going to finish feed, right? If you were the one producing finished feed, right? You can afford to use full fats because you will adjust for the fats, right? So maybe the additional fats that should have gone into the food, you formulate for it. So, and you may not include as much fat as would normally go into it. Yes. So if you can work around that if you are preparing finished feed. Okay. Again, you can also tell your customers, this is the shelf life, right? Shelf life is 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So if I know the shelf life is 2 weeks, if I'm the kind of person that likes to store for 6 months, I will come to your shop.
Yes.
But if I'm ready to come and be restocking every week, I'll be your customer. So that we can also consider. So here we're looking at the mechanical, this is just a flow chart for mechanical extraction. Again, the student I said prepared the concentrate. She actually went this way. If we dry, and then if we don't dry. So in one case, she had the fresh larvae, right? She mixed it with other components, just like the person who mixed with the rice husk, right? She mixed with other components, and she created pellet or crumbles. But she used like a blender to create those crumbles, and then she did that. In the second case, she got dried BSF, milled it, incorporated it with dried ingredients, right, and created the second one. So that she was just trying to explore the different options with either your wet or dry processing, because dry processing is going to be a bit more expensive, right? Because you first dry, right, and then begin your extraction. But if you can extract without that added expense, then it could be a plus. So in this case, this flowchart shows mechanical extraction of fats from the black soda fly larvae, either by the wet or the dry process. And so,
there's a question from the online participant. Mr. Tolu, can you ask your question? Hello, Mr. Tolu. You can send it through chat. I will deliver it to the facilitator.
Okay. So we're talking about extraction of the fats by mechanical extraction, either using the dry or wet processing. So in this case, the green arrows show the path for wet processing. So the larva is put into a screw press. So the larva goes into the screw press, the fresh larva goes into the screw press. It's separated into a liquid, right? And then the pressed cake. But remember, this is fresh larva, right? So this liquid is going to be a mixture of oil and water, right? And then the oven drying will occur after, so they'll have to oven dry this pressed cake. No, they've done extraction here, so they've removed fat, you have cake left, and then it is dried and then ground to whatever size you want. Now with the dry processing here, the fresh larvae will be dried first. You have the dry larvae introduced into the screw press. You have your the oil and the cake, right? And so essentially, the difference here is your drying process is here for your wet processing, and for your dry processing, the drying process is up here. But again, what's the volume of what you are drying, right? You're going to be drying a larger volume up here. In this case, you would have a smaller volume to dry. But again, here, if the oil was your focus, you're going to have a better quality of oil from here than if you did that. So let's quickly look at the...
He has sent the question. He said, does it mean that without defatting, the final feed can only last for 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. The shelf life of your without defatting. No, it would, remember the shelf life of your black soldier fly is 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
It is going into a feed. So when it goes into a feed, right, you are blending with other ingredients. So that is going to extend shelf life a bit more. But if you were storing only as that, right, then the shelf life is 2 weeks. But if you blend it into a feed, it could the presence of other dry ingredients could extend the shelf life. Okay, so comparing your dry and wet processing, extraction based on dry and wet mechanical extraction. At this point, we see that moisture content of your wet is way higher than the dry, and that's because the dry or moisture has been removed prior to this level. In terms of the yield of the cake, remember your dry is a concentrated product. Imagine 1 kg wet, 1 kg dry. How many kg wets went into creating 1 kg dry? About 3, right? So you would see that as we go along, we're almost like multiplying by 3.
Of course.
Right? So you see that for yield, yield is lower in wet processing compared to the dry processing. The yield of oil or pressed liquid. So now, in this case, what you have here, remember, is a combination of water and oil. Right? While for that one, you only have, that's the yield of oil. Now, look at the moisture content of the pressed cake. So the pressed cake in wet processing still has way more water than you have in that. And then the yield of the meal from the dry processing. So the meal from dry processing is about 70%. Did I do that math well? Yes, about 70% higher than for your wet processing. Okay, and then, but when we look at the nutrient quality, right, they are pretty similar, right? And that was what we found with the students who created the protein concentrates using the wet processing or the dry processing. We found out that in terms of nutrient quality, it didn't matter whether it was wet processing or dry processing. However, one step we didn't take was look at the microbial load. Okay. Now, that is something that is key for animal feed. We also want to look at microbial load, right? Is it possible that in your processing, right, you have had a higher microbial load through the wet processing or by the dry processing? And that is one step that we didn't explore. So if one is trying to decide, that's one step further that you want to go, because microbial load is key to shelf life. If you start storing a product with a high microbial load, spoilage is going to happen faster and the shelf life shorter than if the microbial load is lower, despite the nutrient quality. Despite the nutrient quality of the product.
Even microbial load can even attract pathogen at some level.
Yes, that too. Okay, so we'll be wrapping up here, and we'll do a bit of how does this processing influence the quality of black soldier fly larvae? Remember, when we talked about different heating, rapid dehydration, slow dehydration, we had products that had different colors. We had the dark brown, the white, the paler color, right? And that coloration arises from what we call Maillard's reaction. Your meat is red, it enters the pot, you boil it, changes color to what? To brown, right? Yeah. Okay, so what happens? Maillard's reaction is a non-enzymatic browning. So, and it's as a result of reactions between sugars and amino acids, right? And so, what happens with your slow dehydration is that you have a larger degree of Maillard's reaction occurring, right, compared to your rapid dehydration. And that is why for your slow dehydration, like with your oven dry, you saw a darker colored product compared to your microwave. And if you see a product from freeze drying, it's going to be much lighter than even the.
And that means the sun drying will also be so brown.
Yes, sun drying is going to be much browner because it's slow dehydration, right? So you're going to have a larger extent of Maillard reaction happening, and that affects coloration. And remember, we said aesthetics is key, right? And we said work for acceptability. In scarcity, it may not matter.
Yeah.
When it is plenty, I will leave your own and go for the one that looks good. When it's scarce, and now,
Anything goes.
the size of the egg is not mattering. Everybody start taking it. But when there is a glut, that is when you will hear the color of the yolk of our eggs are white. Chickens are not eating well. Color is not. We do that when there's a glut. So that's so aesthetics is important in when we choose this. So Maillard reaction is another enzymatic reaction. It can occur at room temperature. That is why if the meat seller keeps his meat on the table for 6 hours, you will still see some browning compared to the one that just arrived there. So Maillard reaction will happen at room temperature, but it is more intense at between 140 degrees and 165 degrees, which is the condition under which you do your cooking, right? So it's much more. So you see that you boil it, it turns brown. You fry it, it turns browner, much browner. Yeah. So it's different levels of Maillard reaction, and this is responsible for flavor, right? So if you see the freeze-dried black soldier fly, you will not know it is black soldier fly. It doesn't smell
like one.
Like when you saw the oven-dried larvae, it smells like crayfish, right?
Yes.
Maillard reaction will elicit flavor and aroma, right? So the more intense your Maillard reaction, the more the flavor and aroma, right? So the one that you freeze dry, you will almost not even know that it is in the room with you. But the one that you oven dry, once you open the container, everybody knows that something is around. So it impacts on flavor. But there's that reverse reaction, reverse balance. It smells good, doesn't look so good because it's darker in color. So in terms of aesthetics, you want to go with the freeze-dried. But in terms of flavor and aroma, you want to go with the oven-dried. And remember, this aroma has an effect on my animals.
Of course.
They want to eat
because
yes.
Because I'm thinking about
Fish.
No aroma.
So it's important that we have a good balance, right? So choose a method that will give you aesthetics without, for acceptability stage. So you want to have good aesthetics, but you also want that flavor that Maillard reaction brings. But there's also a third component of a Maillard reaction. It's changing color, it's looking good, it's not looking good, right? But actually what's happening is that some compounds are formed in the process, right? And these compounds are not digestible. Right? These compounds are not digestible. So Maillard reaction will reduce digestibility of your product. Right? And it's not, see, when you determine protein content in an ingredient, right? It will measure, in fact, the method we use is, it assumes the method used in most labs is the Jeddah method. Now, what Jeddah method measures is nitrogen. And it assumes that the only source of nitrogen in this feed is from amino acids, which are components of protein. So, whether the amino acid is denatured or it is in the Maillard reaction product, it will measure it as protein, right? So once nitrogen is there, it will estimate as protein. When we now get to the point where your animal begins to digest it, that is when we will now begin to see the effects of, because those that have gone into Maillard reaction will not be digestible. So you find out that two of them have the same content. But the bets on this one are doing better than the bets on this one.
Protein efficiency.
And because the protein here is more available than the proteins in this one. Okay, so that's now let's go back to the story around the Lipid barrier. What is happening in Maillard's reaction? It's essentially amino acids reacting with sugars, right?
Yes.
Now the amino acids that I have written in red are those I termed essential or indispensable. We find out that a lot of them are involved in Maillard's reactions, right? And so your process of your processing method is going to affect the availability of the proteins in feed. So it's just like meat turns brown. There's a level of brownness that's no longer, you lose the nutrients in the meat because you have gone from browning to burning, right? So let's look at it in that light. What has happened is there's a level of processing that you go into that no longer makes the amino acids, which is my concern, because all this story about BSF is because I need amino acids for my chickens, right? Yeah. And so anything you do that will now make these amino acids unavailable, I won't come back. It's only once I will bite. I won't fall 2 times, right? So, in conclusion, your cost of production, you need to strike a balance between cost of production, the aesthetics, and the nutritional quality. I'm interested in nutritional quality. I also care about aesthetics, right? My chickens care about aesthetics. You care about your cost of production because you're in this for a profit. So your choice of processing method should be a balance between all of these to ensure that your needs are met and my needs are also met. Okay, so that's we close on that note. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much for the class. Well, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
First is when we dry,
Okay.
right? If we prefer like the fast drying because we won't lose as much moisture. I won't lose as much. No, well, when we're drying, that process of drying, won't we be using like minerals, soluble minerals, water soluble minerals, if we're like subjecting it to intense drying before we start using it for food?
Okay, so you are less likely to lose minerals due to drying. You're more likely to lose vitamins. Right? Because your minerals are inorganic, right? But your vitamins are organic, right? So you are more likely to lose vitamins, right? However, your animal products are not your primary, at least for animal feed. The ingredient is not my primary vitamin source. I have a vitamin mineral premix that I add to it to meet that need. So all of that will be taken care of. My concern is you should produce a protein ingredient. We're going to lose things in the processing, right? But remember our processing is, shall we leave it to spoil? Or can we do something about it to make it last longer? We will trade off something in the process, right? But we don't want to lose everything. It's the reason why we process.
Or you lose the reason why you are looking for the ingredient.
So for us, your processing should be based on making sure that the digestibility of my protein or amino acid is intact, right? So you don't want to denature amino acids as much extremely, right, to a point where it's no longer useful to me in the product. But yes, some vitamins will be lost, is lost in the processing. Yes.
Then secondly is about the Maillard reaction.
Okay.
You mentioned that they are slow dehydration process results to like higher Maillard reaction. So does that favor like fast drying to slow drying of larvae?
Yes, it does. But something else I didn't say is temperature. It's also a factor. Denaturation also responds to temperature. So it is possible that you dry longer at a lower temperature and get a more intact product than you dry faster at a higher temperature. And so when you decide to go into processing, these are conditions that you want to monitor. So what works for you? There are certain temperatures. We may, when we do pasteurization of milk, right? You know your milk is exposed to a high temperature over a short time. And the aim is sterilize, right? And reduce future possibility of microbial breakdown, right? So there are temperatures that you can, there are extreme temperatures you can go to over a short period of time that will still leave your nutrients intact, right? Compared to slower, higher. If you expose that same ingredient to that same temperature for a longer time, it will denature the protein. And denaturation is our focus in protein processing. You do not want to denature amino acids because then, even though we check the protein content and it looks okay, if we look at amino acid digestibility, we find out that there's nothing there that the animals can use.
Then is there a optimal temperature for lysine and methionine to be denatured? So like what we are trying is there a particular temperature we should be looking at as not to denature the lysine and the methionine?
Okay, so we talked about the fact that Maillard's reaction will occur even at room temperature, but it is optimal at temperatures between 146. Now, one way I've tried to use this knowledge is when we do studies around, we want to assess the amino acids left over in excreta. So we collect the feces or excreta or digester and we want to dry. We are conscious of not denaturing, right? So two things we do. We freeze dry, that's one option. We used to come to IITA to do that. Or I would set my oven at a lower temperature. So rather than heat at 105, I'll take my oven to 55 degrees.
Okay.
Right? So when I drop to 55 degrees, now what should dry in 24 hours may take you 1 week to dry, but it will dry. And I have not exposed my my sample to extreme temperature, so I assume that my amino acids are not remain, at least to a large extent, remain intact. So it's when you're going to do that, you're going to consider costs. You're considering. Remember also, you're reducing temperature, right? You have moved from rapid to slow dehydration. Your final product cannot be the same. Again, the kind of product you are dealing with would also affect. So I cannot tell you that 55 degrees is going to work for you, right? You need to, you have to experiment it. You have to test it at different levels. At least for something, one thing I will say is, remember you're dealing with chitin. Your ingredients is, your larva is wrapped in chitin. If temperatures are low, I'm not sure that the moisture in the middle of the chitin will come out.
And
That is just my theory. That is my theory talking, right? So, but you must be able, you should be able to test it at different temperatures to get what works.
You should come and get money to do PhD.
Okay, let's
Thank you, for this insightful section. I'm concerned about chitin. I've seen a documentary in Singapore. Every part of the larva is used. There's chitin, there's, I think, chitosan or something.
Yeah.
And that's actually what inspired me to be a SF. I have the videos since like 4 years. I just watched it until I got it. Every day I'm like, I have to go do this thing. So, you mentioned chitin. It's been mentioned at different times during this training. So, isn't there something that can be done with it?
Yes. The video you watch, what are they doing?
Let's ask her.
Yes,
Watching video now.
Wait now, wait.
Okay, so yes, there are things that can be done. There are things that can be done with
One house.
chitin, chitosans, and all of that. Okay, are we conversant with the term prebiotics?
Yes.
Right? So prebiotics are considered as an alternative, right? And in human diets, they are introduced in human diets to manage gut health, right? So you often will find, that's why you see a lot of, they tell you, use yogurt, and that is high in probiotics and all of that. So prebiotics, probiotics, they manage gut health different ways, right? And these chitosans find their way into prebiotic products. And that's why for areas where they have the markets, they are willing to go down to separate. So they go into after extracting the oil, they go and do a breakdown so that you can separate the chitin. But they also will get it from shrimps, from the exoskeleton from shrimps and all of that. So yes, in places where they have the specialized markets, right, they are willing to go down to separating, right? So extracting the chitin and using it for that purpose. So there are things that's useful, but in terms of, for us in the feed industry, it is a negative more than it is a positive. Especially considering the fact that I'm still dealing with plant ingredients that are coming with fiber.
Yeah.
So your chitin is just adding to it. So it's, for me, we consider them anti-nutrients.
Yeah.
Right? In other fields, it's something that they want, but not us.
And you get more chitin from crickets.
Yeah. And also,
More in exoskeleton, C.
one house. Looking at the chitin now, and I'm looking at it in respect to fish and poultry. Now, for poultry, does it have effect? But I know for fish, it does. So
As it reduces digestibility.
it reduces digestibility, but for poultry, it's what I don't know.
For fish and poultry, the digestive system in fish and poultry are similar. We assume that they are monogastrics. Both of them are considered monogastric. So yes, for poultry, it is an anti-nutrient. But again, like I said, how do you manage it? If I know that I am bringing black soldier fly into my diet, right? I will avoid things like wheat bran, right? Because I will treat chitin as a fiber. Remember, the problem with poultry and chitin is not that it is poisonous. It is the fact that it is considered fiber, right? So it adds to fiber in my diet. if I can formulate my diet in such a way that I do away with other fiber sources, right? And for us in poultry, we say, in broiler diets, we say your fiber level should not be lower than 3% and should not exceed 5%, right? So 3 to 5%, because we also do not do no fiber.
Okay.
It is detrimental.
Okay.
So we do 3 to 5%. So if I can formulate a diet to meet that accommodates that black soldier fly, it's doable. I may not. Things we can do is we may not use black soldier fly as the sole. Let me see. It's supposed to be in the afternoon. Okay, no, sorry, I didn't put that table there. When we formulate diets with black soldier fly, you find out that you have a higher fiber content in the diet, right? And so what you want to do is see if you can eliminate ingredients that are bringing fiber. So ingredients you normally use as diluents, like wheat bran, corn bran, rice bran, you eliminate them. Now, if you still have gone beyond the range, the next thing you want to do is cut back on the volume of BSF you are bringing to diet. But also remember, your soybean is coming with fiber. Every time you remove BSF, you are bringing soybean. So and that's why at such when we formulate diet, you always have to work with a nutritionist.
Yeah.
So you create a balance that meets the animal's needs.
Well, in addition to
You have asked questions before now.
Nobody is monopolizing the question. So no, it's just in addition to that, for the way nature has designed poultry in their guts, they have like enzymes that digest chitins. So they have, I think they have chitinases, as maybe in low volume now. So they would digest chitins better than fish. So if you include, I want to believe when they pick on worms and all of this, they still have a way to fully digest or utilize their chitin.
Okay, no, they do not digest it. You see, one thing is that you will eat what you are offered, right? What you do not digest, you excrete.
That's roughly
Right? So it's not that they digest it, right? They would excrete it. The problem we have is when it gets to a level where your fiber content, right, which in this case we're looking at fiber plus chitin and all of those, exceeds that upper limit. What happens is it begins to impact on other things. So it begins to impact on digestibility of other things. So say for example you find out digestibility of protein is 85%. When you begin to exceed the upper limit of your fiber, then your protein digestibility will begin to reduce. Right? And that's what you want to avoid. So no, they don't digest it. Right? So, but they would consume it and excrete it. The only thing is, when we now go beyond the upper limit, it can impair digestibility or utilization of other nutrients that you need, or other desirable nutrients. And
since this fiber contributes to bowel movement, so if they are in much more quantity, it's going to affect the digestibility.
So I like the angle of the bowel movement because it just makes it simple. If fiber is laxative, right, which means moves content in your digester faster, there is less time
for
interaction
absorption.
with the enzyme. So it's as though swallow, excrete, right? Swallow, excrete. So you want to put your fiber level at that level that will support bowel movement, but not speed up movement through the digestion.
It's like a speed train and a locomotive train.
Okay, yes.
In combining the feed for the fish, we look into the cost of production, especially that of protein content.
His name is.
Yes.
Sit down.
I'm listening to you.
It's allowed.
When you were discussing with us, you made mention of the larva, the larva and the soya, that one can completely replace that soya bean with larva. But when we look at the amino acid content in the two components, we discover that they are almost the same. But looking at the fish meal, which is also the problem in the cost of production of the feed, can we replace the fish completely for the larva instead of the soya bean? And sorry, man,
okay.
And if we are able to do so, looking at the amino acid content, at times we say that if we make use of the fish meal, there's no need of getting the concentrate. Getting the amino acid like methylene, lysine, there's no need of adding it as a concentrate. Since we have enough concentrate in the fish, and we are completely replacing it, the level of the amino acid, are we going to complement it with the concentrate? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. So I will approach this from my knowledge of feed formulation. When we use fish meal in poultry, right? We don't exceed, say, 5%. We don't want to go too much. And it has things around fish stains in the meat and all of this, as well as cost, right? So let's assume that fish meal is about 2 times what my soybean contains in terms of nutrients, right? So that means that if I want to replace fish meal in poultry diet, right? And fish meal in the diet is about 3%. I can introduce 6% soybean, right? And remove fish meal, and we'll still be fine. We'll balance other things up. But in fish, the fish meal inclusion in your diet can go as high as 50%.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which means that there is no room for exchange.
It should be 50-50.
Do you understand? There's no room for exchange.
For
If you look at-
substitution.
For substitution. If you remove 50% maize, 50% fish meal, and you bring black soldier fly, you have only met 50% of the need. No room to add more black soldier fly to balance it out. And that's why it's easier to replace fish meal in poultry diet than to replace fish meal in fish diet. So what you often will see is either supplementary feeding or a partial replacement. So we still have fish meal, but you are bringing in black soldier fly too. So maybe it's replacing fish meal at a lower level. But for soybean, we can afford to do 100%. But again, when we get into the afternoon section, I have a few graphs that show what you should expect, even when you do 100% replacement. We see things that we've seen in certain studies at 100% replacement, which may not totally favor 100 replacement of soybean for fish meal, even in poultry. In theory, yes. But when your animals start talking, you have to listen. The theory is looking good, but the animals are not doing like the theory is saying, and so you make adjustments. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your fishes, your feeds.
They will speak to you.
You're right in this.
I can do that.